Good evening, and welcome to episode 71 of the Political Mike podcast. It is my pleasure and honor to have with me Ms. Candace Walker, who is the Political Action Chair for the Henry County, Georgia NAACP. She is an admitted politics junkie. She has been involved in her community since she was a child. Originally from Los Angeles, California, at a young age, she worked on the campaigns of Yvonne Braithwaite, Burke, and Maxine Waters. She eventually took a job with Waters as a member of her field office. As the Political Action Chair, Ms. Walker has hosted several events for Henry County, Georgia, including webinars on the new voting laws and the redistricting in Georgia, as well as candidate forums. She is a graduate of Langston University, where she received her Bachelor's of Arts degree in broadcast journalism. She is the past gospel lifestyle editor for Christian Men's Publication, and she is a member of the Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and also works in IT. Ms. Walker, thanks for being on the show tonight. I'm so excited to have you with me, particularly because all eyes seem to be on Georgia this midterm election season, as we are now transitioning from the primary phase into the general election phase. We had our last major primary night last week, not this past Tuesday, but the Tuesday prior. And so the first question I want to ask you, Ms. Walker, in light of the fact that Georgia has enacted recently SB 202, a new voting rights measure that will make it significantly more difficult for voters, particularly voters of color, to cast a ballot and engage in democracy. How has the NAACP worked to overcome the barrier that SB 202 puts in place for voters of color this midterm election season and election seasons to come?
Well, first of all, Mike, I want to thank you for allowing me to come here and join your show. In terms of SB 202, as we all know, in 2020, the power of the minority vote was on full display here in Georgia when we turned the state blue. And we sent to the Senate the first Black and Jewish senators to represent the state. But as a way to fight that display of power, the governor and the state legislators passed what we consider the worst voter suppression bill we have seen in a long, long time. And what we have done here at the Henry County branch of the NAACP is first educate the voters on what's in the bill. We held a webinar, Victory Over Voter Suppression, with our partners, the COO of the New Georgia Project, Kendra Cotton. She gave a deep dive into the bill, what IDs people had to use to vote, how to vote early, how to vote with an early absentee ballot, all the things that we could do to educate the voter on SB 202, we did. And we really focused on the main concern that we have about this bill is Section 7, which allows the state board to take over county election boards and recertify an election. So if they think something's been done in malfeasance, this is their chance to take over an election board. And that's what they've been trying to do in democratically held and, brown people areas. So this is very concerning. It's one that the provisions of the bill that we are watching very closely, but we are also now working on strategizing around that, right? We are canvassing, we're working on setting up transportation to and from the polls for voters. We're hosting Get Out the Vote events in the community. We want to flood the voting box in a way that will make it almost impossible for them to take over the elections or claim that there's a stolen election, as we've heard since 2020. That is our way of fighting back. You have to fight back at the ballot box. It's just that simple. You got to get out and vote.
Right, and we know that this bill, SB 202, has opened the door for a number of changes. Mail-in absentee voting, for instance, will look much different as a result of SB 202, especially after 1.3 million people used that method in the November 2020 general election. So according to this bill, voters over 65 with a disability in the military and those in the military who live overseas will still be able to apply once for a ballot and automatically receive one for the rest of the election cycle. But the earliest voters can request a mail-in ballot will be 11 weeks before an election. This is a huge difference because before you had 180 days. So this is less than half as much time. And so my question is, will this change put in place as it pertains to mail-in voting? Do you anticipate that this change would reduce voter turnout among minorities?
We really don't know how this will affect the turnout, but what we do know is it was designed to reduce it. That we know without a doubt. And so, in an effort to combat that, the NAACP nationwide is sending out links to absentee ballot application requests. We are, sending them via email, we're sending them via text, and we're also sending them out to places where seniors are, like nursing homes and facilities of that nature. We're instructing them on how to fill that out virtually and to get it turned in, and try to provide them with as much access to the application request procedures as possible.
Right. And so one of the significance, and we were talking about it backstage a little bit, a lot of people are nervous right now. Those who are Democrats, I should say, are nervous right now, or Democrat leaning, because it looks as if Herschel Walker is leading at the moment very slightly. Now, it's interesting that Walker seems to have a razor thin lead, although it's just 2 points, while at the same time, Stacey Abrams seems to be trailing her opponent, Brian Kemp, in the rematch that's being set for this November by about 4 points, according to 538's polling, using at least 5 different polling sources. What are your thoughts on that kind of discrepancy between the way Warnock is doing and the way Abrams is doing against their general election opponent in the polling so far?
Well, first, let me say that the NAACP is a nonpartisan organization. So I really can't speak on candidates from an NAACP perspective. In terms of my own opinion about it, you have 2 different races. You have 2 men that are running against each other for the Senate, and then you have a Black woman and a white man that are running for governor. The dynamics are there in play. And she would make history as the first African-American female governor in the history of this country, and the first female governor, I believe, for the state of Georgia. So there's quite a few challenges that Stacey has to overcome and face in order to ascend to the governorship.
So one concern for those who are paying attention to how votes are being counted, because that's a major concern in light of the fact that many have cast doubt upon the results of the past election, and it metastasized into something we've never seen in this country before, an assault on the United States Capitol. 9/11 didn't even go that far. So in this respect, what challenges do you foresee for the NAACP nationwide if candidates across the country for the position of Secretary of State, and of course we know that particular office is responsible for counting and tallying up the votes of their particular state, if candidates across the country for Secretary of State are willing to overturn their state election results for political partisan reasons, what kind of challenges would the NAACP encounter in ensuring that minority voters, particularly African-American voters, Black voters, votes are not dispelled and discounted?
Yeah, we are living in a historic moment when it's not a maybe that the fate of American democracy hangs in the balance, but it is a certain fact. All Americans, not just our organization, the NAACP, but all Americans should be very concerned that these individuals that are running to oversee our free and fair elections are also willing to overturn our votes and not let the people decide who should represent them. This country is based on being for the people, by the people, not just the chosen few. And as Janae Nelson, the president and director counsel for the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, said, Americans face the greatest assault on our voting rights since the Jim Crow Black Codes rolled back the progress made during Reconstruction. So the threat to our democracy is real. And we are literally in a fight to make sure that every vote, not just the minority vote. I mean, there's power in the minority vote, and we basically show that in 2020. That's why we have, our first Black female vice president. Okay, so we know how that happened. with the minority vote. But every vote should count and should be counted. And this threat is real. It is real and it is challenging. One thing about the NAACP, we are known freedom fighters, and we have been fighting since the inception of this organization. And the great thing about the Henry County chapter, we have some strong freedom fighters in our chapter. Our leadership, Dr. Rosalind Matthews, has led us on this battlefield, and we won't go back. We're going to make sure that we stay in touch with our voters. We're going to organize them. We're going to get them fighting, screaming, dragging to the ballot box. And we're just going to make sure that there's so many votes that they cannot overturn our elections. The only way we can win this thing is to flood the ballot box. And that's what the Henry County NAACP is committed to doing.
Now, this past February, there was a push by House Democrats and Senate Democrats to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act into law. And of course, that failed in the Senate. But there are those who are, I guess, becoming skeptical as to whether or not there could be any serious legislative measure to strengthen voting rights since the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, when the Supreme Court really took out Section 5 and Section 2B, I believe, of the Voting Rights Act of 1964. Do you have any hope of, I guess, a national legislative push after the midterm election season, or even, maybe before 2024, to have another push to ensure that all voters' ability to cast a ballot is protected? And I also want to get your thoughts on whether or not you think it's more feasible to think that that kind of change can only happen on the state legislative level at this point.
No, I have hope. And the reason I have hope is because our elections are coming. And we have the opportunity we have the Democrat and Republicans and all of them. We have diverse candidates out there that support voting rights. And we, the NAACP, are supporting those candidates. We're going to support the candidates that offer the best hope for our community and that offer the best policies for our community. We have to keep in mind that the Montgomery bus boycott didn't, kill racism overnight. I mean, that happened, and then it took like 10 years before the Civil Rights Bill was passed, right? So things don't happen overnight, but you can't give up hope. You can't give up the fight. And we're not, the NAACP, and especially our branch, the Henry County NAACP, we're not going to give that up. We're going to keep pressing. And I really do think eventually the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, for that great civil rights icon, will pass.
And what are your thoughts on whether or not there could be a statewide voting measure in the state of Georgia? Is that realistic in your view?
Yeah, it's realistic. Just at one point, this state legislation was blue. It can be blue again. We just have to get out. We just have to turn out the numbers. Numbers don't lie. If we get the people out to vote, we can win. If everybody goes to vote, all people of all color, that white, black, all different kinds of people, get out and vote for what's right for the community. Yeah, this bill can pass too. I mean, John Lewis is from Georgia. He's our son, our icon. So why wouldn't we want to honor him that way? Why wouldn't we?
So this bill, SB 202, that we've been talking about so far in this program, also prohibits state and local governments from sending unsolicited applications, and third-party groups that send applications have new rules to follow. Their applications must clearly be marked as being not an official government application, or not an official government publication, rather, and that is not a ballot. Plus, third-party groups are allowed to send applications to voters who have not already requested or voted an absentee ballot. Has the NAACP engaged in sending unsolicited applications to those who are eligible to vote? Or if not, will they do so this year?
I don't know. I can't speak on the national level if that's something that they are going to do. What I do know is the national office did send the links to apply for the absentee ballot, and they sent it out nationwide to all of our members, and we've encouraged all of them to send that link out as well. in terms of actual applications, I'm not sure if they're doing that or not, to be honest.
So, uh, President Biden and his congressional allies seem to be on a legislative roll uh, after the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, the PACT Act, and that's also after the bipartisan infrastructure deal last year and the American Rescue Plan. That was probably the first major legislative accomplishment he had. Um, and so we're starting to see a little bit of an improvement in his polling. Based on the fact that you are a nonpartisan organization, I want to get your thoughts on how does the NAACP assess, or in your view, how would you assess the president's performance as it relates to addressing policies that align with the interests of the NAACP, particularly in the realm of voting rights?
We know that President Biden supports the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. He supported the For the People Act. He wants to shore up voting rights for all. He is, he made a lengthy speech about that. We are in line with him in terms of his thoughts on that. But we also know that he can't pass these laws, right? There needs to be more candidates in the Senate that can get this bill passed. And that's what we are concentrating on this November, as the NAACP is supporting candidates that support the best policies for our community. Be it whatever party they're in, we're supporting those candidates that are for voting rights. We're supporting those candidates that are for women's rights. We're supporting those candidates that are for civil rights. And, we'll back them all the way into the office. That's our goal.
Yeah, and also tonight, right after the program, shortly after the program, he's going to be giving an address at National Historic Park in Philadelphia. And the theme or the focus of the address will be the battle for the soul of the nation, which was his campaign theme, his campaign slogan. And of course, the whole idea is to really wake people up to the idea that this is not a regular election. We're not dealing with with regular candidates here. We're dealing. This is an extraordinary time.
Yeah.
In which democracy itself seems to be teetering on the edge.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people may not be. It may not have become real enough for people. Yes, we saw the January 6th insurrection, but since then there have been attempts to either characterize it as something that was not as bad as it was, to try to politicize it, so that people can throw their hands in the air and say, "Oh, politics. Let me just stay away from that." What has the NAACP done to really wake people up to the fact that voting in this election is crucial? Usually during midterm elections, especially off-year elections, enthusiasm among voters of color is not as high as it is in presidential years. And then it's even worse among young people. So has the NAACP engaged in any kind of initiative to just wake people up to the fact that they have to participate? This is a crucial election. And although we've heard sayings like this is the most important election of our lifetime, time and time again, how has the NAACP, just hit home for folks that, no, this is something that, if extremely crucial, like you have to participate?
Yeah, we were just on a national call with President Johnson and the rest of the NAACP leadership. This Get Out the Vote initiative of organizing, of transporting people back and forth, of explaining to them how our democracy is on the line, is from the top echelons of the NAACP all the way down here to little Henry County NAACP chapter. The push is going forward. We're partnering with people like the New Georgia Project and Common Ground and so on and so forth. We're partnering to get this out. The Henry County NAACP has a Get Out the Vote rally that we're planning for the first day of early voting, which is October 22nd, in conjunction with the Southern Metro Atlanta Pan-Hellenic Council. So we're doing it with the D9. Our goal is, to get out, get on radio, get on billboards, and just really push people to the polls and drive people to the polls if we have to. All of this is supported from a national front from the NAACP. So yeah, this is Yeah, this is a fight. Just like I said, our democracy is on the line. It's a fight. We're up to the challenge. We've been fighting since day one, and we will continue to fight, and we will continue to go where we need to go. We're canvassing. We're knocking on doors now. There was some hesitancy with COVID-19, with the primaries to do that. But at this general election, that's what we're getting ready to do as well. Knock on doors, drive people to the polls, and really assert the need that there's power in your vote, and just remind them of the great gains and accomplishments that they contributed to with their vote, in terms of the first Black female VP, the first Black woman on the Supreme Court, the debt cancellation, and all the things that we've been driving for, really pushing for, are coming to pass. But they're coming to pass because we got out, we voted in huge numbers, and we made a difference, and we can do it again.
So this is a completely different landscape after June 24th of this year. And the reason why, of course, is because of the Dobbs decision. Of course, that's the infamous Supreme Court landmark decision that finally did what conservatives for about 50 years, almost 50, or a little over, or almost 50 years, have been trying to accomplish. And that is the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Of course, in the Roe versus Wade Supreme Court decision, they really placed a woman's right to decide to engage in an abortion under the penumbra of rights that fall under privacy rights. Now that that's done away with, according to the Dobbs decision, we're dealing with a completely different landscape. We were talking about it last week about, just the congressional elections seem to just be upended. We talked about New York 19th congressional district, where the Republican was widely expected to win. This was a canary in the coal mine election. The Democrat comes out winning, and he himself said, "I didn't expect this." Now, in this particular instance, now that we're dealing with the NAACP and what they've done in terms of their work, I'm curious because in Georgia, first of all, Georgia has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the country. And the latest data shows that 41% of pregnancies in Georgia were wanted later or unwanted. Of course, even within that that demographic, African American women have been disproportionately victims of childbirth mortality and everything like that. Yes. I want to get your thoughts, Ms. Walker, on what the NAACP has done to support Black women and women of color in Georgia, whose lives may depend on having access to abortion.
Yeah. The decision of the Supreme Court of the United States to overturn the fundamental right, let's get this, to abortion that was established 50 years ago in Roe v. Wade is disappointing on many fronts. Women should have the right to choose regarding their reproductive health, a right that we all value when it comes to our health. And the government should not be able to interfere in a woman's decision regarding their own bodies and their own right to privacy. So the NAACP has, of course, voiced their opposition to this ruling, and they're urging everyone to call their senators and tell them to support codifying reproductive rights. The Women's Health Protection Action bill, it passed the U.S. House of Representatives in September of last year. And that bill is there in the Senate. And if we get more pro-choice candidates, like I said, that's what we're doing. We're backing those candidates. If we get them in the Senate, it will pass. And not just Black women or just women of color will be protected, but women, period, will be protected if it passes. And the only way that it can pass is if we get those candidates in office to do that. And here in Georgia, we need to do the same thing. We have pro-choice people running for state office right now. And we need to support those candidates that are pro-choice and that are there to help women, not just Black women, but, this does hit proportionally to Black women, but all women deserve the right to choose. And that is the position of the NAACP.
Yeah. And there was a striking study done by Duke University published in December that suggested that a complete abortion ban could increase Black maternal deaths by 33%. And in addition to that, you have the Georgia House Bill 481. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals lifted an injunction on House Bill 481 which is also known as the Georgia fetal heartbeat law. This bill bans most abortions in Georgia after 6 weeks, before most people even know that they're pregnant, and took effect immediately after the court issued an immediate stay. What are your thoughts on the impact that this law can have or has already had on this state as it pertains to women whose interests align with the NAACP's interests? And has the NAACP taken grassroots action or any kind of political action to rally support against this particular bill?
Yes, it has a huge impact. And yes, this is something that we are challenging on every level. We are making sure that we are alerting people to their fundamental rights being stripped. Because for us, it's not just abortion that's on the line, it's all of our fundamental rights that have been given to us over these last 50 years. If you read Judge Thomas's statement, he's not looking just at abortion. He's thinking Brown versus the Board of Education needs to be revisited. He's, looking in same-sex marriage needs to be revisited. So, we are really teetering on the precipice of having our rights thrown out and totally eroded. So yes, the NAACP is rallying up the troops, like I said, and we are supporting candidates that will shore up everyone's right to vote and everyone's right to, their right to live and have freedom, which is what this country is supposedly all about.
So for those who may be watching, maybe a young person watching, who's just feeling fatigue, maybe they didn't see the policies that they wanted enacted fast enough. Even with the student debt forgiveness, I've heard a lot of criticism about, maybe 10,000 may not be much for them, or, as wonderful as I thought personally that the move was by the White House, there are those who always seem to find some reason to point out that things aren't as fast paced as they like it to be, or as progressive as they would like it to be. What is your message to them in light of trying to get them to see the seriousness of engaging in this particular election? There are those who may argue, look, I don't want to reward those who already have power by giving them more power if I'm not seeing what I want done happen yet. What are your thoughts, Ms. Walker?
It's important for young people and all people really, especially minorities, to realize that there is power in their vote. And one way to ensure that things won't change is to not vote. We just did a marvelous job of sending our first Black senator from this great state of Georgia to the Senate. And we did that through the power of our vote. We sent our first Jewish senator through the power of our vote. There is power in our vote. Yes, our president, for the NAACP, wished that there was more that President Biden did in terms of student debt relief. But this is just the beginning. And it's important to realize that after he made that statement, several Republican senators went into their room and worked with the states to now tax that relief. There are several states that are going to tax these students on that $10,000. So if you want to change that from happening, keep that from happening, and you want to get more funding, and you want to move with civil rights, and you want to move forward with voting rights, and you want to move forward with housing, here in Georgia, the housing rates are just skyrocketing. You want to move with housing relief, then you have to put the candidates in office that support those things. You have to put pro-choice candidates in office, pro-civil rights candidates in office, low-income housing candidates in office. You sit on your hands and you don't put those candidates in office, then all the gains that you have witnessed over these past few years will be gone. It's just that simple.
And I would be remiss, I do have people who'd like to know your opinion about the case with Rayshard Brooks. Of course, that was the young man who was killed during a George Floyd protest, and he himself became a symbol for the Black Lives Matter movement. Of course, this was a gentleman that was engaged in an altercation with a police officer The police officer used deadly force against him. His life was taken. When we see these kinds of things happen, it's so tempting to just kind of become desensitized to these kinds of situations when you've seen them so many times before. But of course, each situation has its own specific individualized set of facts. And the thing that unites these incidents is the fact that we're seeing time and time again that Black lives, brown lives are constantly at risk whenever we are talking about traffic stops, police searches and seizures, anything that can potentially escalate. What has the NAACP done to address, I guess the NAACP, particularly in Henry County and in Georgia, if you can answer that, to address situations like Rayshard Brooks in Georgia and any other situation where a young person or a young person of color or any person of color really has a situation where they're engaging with law enforcement and it escalates to a degree where their life is now on the line?
Yeah. Well, the Henry County branch of the NAACP has a legal redress committee. Now, we don't provide legal representation, or nor do we provide direct programs and service for that, but we will investigate allegations of discrimination. We will stand with families for police brutality, and we will, educate the community about their resources and what is available to them. Nationally, the NAACP is against all forms of police brutality, and we have joined several lawsuits against the police and their abuse of force. We've done it from the very beginning, and we will continue to do it. In the case of Rayshard Brooks, we stood again asking for a complete investigation, asking for charges to be made. There were charges. Now there's no charges. It's, disappointing when someone loses their life and you don't see the accountability. But you have to keep fighting. It goes back to being in the fight, being on the battlefield and going after the wrongs that are out there in terms of civil rights and police brutality. We will continue to fight it. We will continue to go after it at every turn.
Well, Ms. Walker, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much for having me. I just want to tell everyone out there, if they are interested in joining the Henry County NAACP, we need members. We need more freedom fighters. So feel free to log on to our website. It's Henry County GANAACP. We have meetings virtually every Tuesday, second Tuesday of the month. So next Tuesday, if you want to join us, feel free to come on board.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Ms. Walker, for all the work that you do with the NAACP. Thank you for being in the fight constantly and being persistent in this pursuit of, ensuring that everyone's civil rights are intact. I think it's the work that you're doing, of course, is God's work. It's crucial work. Thank you for what you're doing. I want to invite those who are viewing to go ahead and check out the Henry County NAACP or an NAACP chapter in the county or community where you live.
Yeah.
And again, also refrain from sketchy sources of information. Challenge the sources of information that you do get your news from, and make informed decisions when you do go to vote. And I do want to stress the whole platform was born out of the necessity to encourage people to vote. So I want to encourage you to take this election seriously. The stakes are high.
Yes.
Participate in this midterm election. Thank you so much, Ms. Walker.
Power in your vote. In your vote.
Definitely.
Make sure you vote.
And once again, thank you for tuning in to episode 71 of the Political Mike podcast. Thank you all so much.